To the untrained eye, a field of fireweed can look spectacular, but for the farmers, it's nothing but a pest.
It's toxic and it comes up in such a thick canopy it affects the germination of other plants.
It's estimated the weed, which is a type of daisy, costs Australian farmers tens of millions of dollars each year to control. At a property near Maitland, scientists from Sydney University are working with New South Wales Agriculture and the Hunter Catchment Management Trust to study the weed. Tests are being made on pasture with the weed and pasture without to quantify its effect. Scientists are bringing insects from South Africa which it's believed will attack fireweed. But many more tests are needed before quarantine will give its okay and the bugs are proven to be safe in the Australian environment.
It's probably 5 to 10 years away.
Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The game at Hawkins Oval was dictated by two significant factors, the gusty westerly wind and a reluctance by players of either side to pick up the ball. The turning point came in the third quarter when Lismore, which held a 2-goal lead at half-time, squandered the wind advantage. Whitebridge kicked 3 goals 2-0 in the final quarter to take out the match 8-5-53 to 7-3-45. Lismore bows out of the Lions Cup. Whitebridge will next play in Sydney in a semi-final of the statewide competition. Best for Whitebridge were full forward Brad Campbell, who kicked 5 goals, Ben Fitzgerald, Michael Davison and the two Rovers Joe Freeman and Ben Hodges. For Lismore, best of field was Nick Henderson with his 3 goals, Michael Fisher on the wing, Adam Palmer in the centre and Simon Bronx. Lismore halfback flanker Andrew Pepper was taken to hospital following the match for a precautionary check-up after suffering mild concussion in a heavy tackle in the last quarter.
Whereas in the past we've been prepared to accept reserves and parcels of land that developers just didn't want, we found them now very inaccessible.
Redhead Tip, the only dump on the eastern side of Lake Macquarie, closed yesterday after 18 years. It was celebrated by residents who have long campaigned for its end. But just what the site will be used for is the next hurdle for Lake Macquarie Council. Mayor John Kilpatrick says a plan of management will be undertaken, but there are already some suggestions.
Maybe we can incorporate something to fit in with Jules Wetland. It sort of adjoins it. And that maybe we could provide some sort of parking or recreational area there that's adjoining the wetlands and link the two together. But anyway, we'll be getting public input, some ideas, and see what happens.
Extra council crews will patrol roads surrounding the Redhead site in an attempt to stop potential dumpers. Meanwhile, those residents who would have used the tip were taking advantage of Council's new collection service. Cleanaway is delivering around 55 bins a day, each resident entitled to 4 collections a year. For Cahaiba's Harry Papworth, though, it was a case of getting rid of what he has long wanted to.
I would have used the dump, but I've been 20 years waiting to use the dump.
While it's a small nation of just 160,000 people, the Western Samoan Rugby Union team is one of the world's heavyweights. Just 2 days ago, they won a rugged battle against Queensland. Recently, they've beaten Scotland and Wales. So what's the secret? Tough upfront football, elusive backs and a training program that keeps them extremely fit. Drills shown to them by Knights coach David Waite 2 seasons ago.
He came and talked to our coach about what they do in training, and then our coach made us do his training, and then so we call it Newcastle training, and it's bloody hard, you know.
The Samoans are under fire from Winfield Cup sides like the Knights, Manly and Gold Coast, which want to sign on their players.
But that's life, you know. But I think we're trying to encourage our players to stay with rugby union, at least for the time being, until the World Cup.
The Western Samoans clash with New South Wales at Marathon Stadium tomorrow night at 7:30. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Bill Morty today introduced to Newcastle his 2 latest boxing attractions, Justin Rousel and Yianni Rivera. Morty has a love-hate relationship with Newcastle, the city warming to Costa Zoo's fights, but turning a cold shoulder on other boxing events. The promoter says he needs at least 1,500 fight fans on Friday night to break even. If he doesn't, he may not come back.
If you keep hitting your head against a brick wall, eventually you've got to take a Bex. You know, it would depend. Friday night will tell us and give us a pretty good guide as to what we do.
But 22-year-old Rousel could be the draw card Morty's needed. He models his style on the flashy Sugar Ray Leonard, and he's going for 9 straight wins when he meets Daryl Hiles on Friday.
It's always terrific to get up here in Newcastle, and it's like a big country town. It's a great country atmosphere, and I'm feeling very relaxed.
Rivera has overcome hand problems to fight against Shane Wheatley for the Australian bantamweight title.
If they're both successful Friday night, we'll look at 2 international opponents for them for here in Newcastle, and the opponents would be rated between 1 and 15 in one of the respective boxing authorities.
Although Newcastle has missed out on Costa Zoo's next fight, the city could still be a chance to host his expected title bout later in the year.
Well, Brad Melvin wants to get a win on Marathon Stadium, so we'd probably look at Marathon Stadium pretty seriously.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
It's about as complicated as a legal case can get. 13 people are suing the Newcastle Workers Club over its collapse in the 1989 earthquake. The club in turn is suing the council, and the council the club. Now a new twist has been added in Sydney's Supreme Court, with the Workers Club taking action against the builder, architect and engineer responsible for the club's construction. It's a case that is expected to have enormous ramifications.
The earthquake sent shocks through Newcastle. A claim like this sends shock through the profession. All the professions will be interested in the outcome of it.
According to Ray Watterson of the Newcastle University's Faculty of Law, what could make this possibly the country's most complicated legal case will be the mountain of evidence expected to satisfy the claims and counterclaims.
In terms of the evidence, remember they've got to go back some 20 years to find out what happened in the construction of design of this. Now that's a big process of discovery and investigation. Yes, in terms of the evidence, it could be a major case, and indeed in terms of the law it could have something to say as well.
The bulk of evidence from those injured in the club's collapse will be heard in Newcastle in November. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
Marathon Stadium, the home of the Knights, was an unlikely venue for the rugby union clash. About 6,000 fans cheered on as New South Wales turned on the tries, the first to winger Michael Sykes, and there was more to come. The Blues led by 18 points to 7 at the break. Into the second half, the Tourists kept in the race with penalty kicks and then turned up the heat with some big hits. New South Wales kept running the ball and always looked dangerous, but the Western Samoans weren't about to throw in the towel, fighting back with some entertaining backline play. The final score, Western Samoa 21, New South Wales 18. New South Wales skipper Tim Wallace managed only 1 goal from 9 attempts. Considering it was a Blues second string side, the Tourists' unbeaten tag isn't looking too good for the clash with Australia on Saturday. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The four are travelling along the east coast for a major cause, the Bone Marrow Donor Institute. Michael Zing and John Dunn are the riders, with Maggie and Jim Taylor their important support crew. All have taken holidays to complete their quest. Michael and John started the ride on June 3rd at Cape York, pedalling south at 150 kilometres a day. They plan to finish in Melbourne on Saturday week after covering 4,600 kilometres. Their aim is to raise money and increase community awareness about the Bone Marrow Donor Institute and the vital role it plays in saving the lives of those threatened by leukaemia.
It would be fantastic if one person who heard about this ride decided to sign up and saved someone's life.
It's Michael's second ride for the Bone Marrow organisation, his involvement giving him the chance to meet leukaemia sufferers.
Unfortunately, they all seem to be about 3 and 4 years old and they've all got only 12 months to live, and so this is sort of what spurs it on a bit, because kids are the future and you never know, the one life you save might be the next Prime Minister or someone.
After resting in Newcastle, Michael and John left for Sydney, where they'll spend the night. Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
14 kids who have been taken onto that scheme. Never worked before. A scheme that would in fact have improved the area, the environment in this district. They're simply been turned back to the scrap heap. The federal government has to reconsider this. It is a disgrace, and it shows that they are not serious about unemployment with the youth.
Premier Faye's swipe at the federal government's dropping of the Tinambit wetland scheme hit Labor at one of its weakest points, unemployment. But federal Labor member Bob Horne says it's state government departments that have killed the training scheme.
The funding has fallen through simply because of bad management, simply because all of the approvals necessary were not in place.
The $350,000 Tinambit Wetlands project was to be a combined state and federal government initiative to improve the environment and create training opportunities for 14 young unemployed people. The federal government pledged $120,000 in June on the condition work start by today. But the funding was cancelled after Maitland Council refused a development application from the Department of Conservation and Land Management only last Tuesday. Council said, while regrettable, work will not be able to commence before this date, as it will be impossible for Council to receive and fully assess the DA in time. State Liberal member Peter Blackmore was unavailable to comment on Labor's claims. But the pawns in this political game are the young people who were to work on the wetlands project. As the politicians continue to bicker over who's to blame, the young unemployed are still out of work. But there is hope. Federal member Bob Horne says the funding could still go ahead if the application is resubmitted. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. Early morning track work is the harsh reality behind the glamour of racing, but it's also where dreams of big race wins are born. But there was one rider at Broadmeadow Racetrack this morning that would rather a world title belt than a Melbourne Cup. Justin Rousell is not only a boxer, he's also a licensed track rider. Although he hasn't ridden for 6 months, it only took a leg up from a bemused Costa Zoo to get him back on track. He was just another face among regular riders this morning, but tomorrow night he'll be the main attraction at the Newcastle Entertainment Centre as he defends his Australian crown. Rousell says he enjoys riding and it's a great way to keep fit, but he's content to keep trying his luck in the ring.
I feel for the jockeys that have got to shed a lot of weight and ride in big races because I know how hard it would be. Thankfully I don't have to do that, I just have to fight 12 rounds.
With Rousell's weight hovering around the 60-kilogram mark, he'd still make a good jumps jockey. But Russian-born boxer Costa Zoo says he'll leave the racing to the horses. Would you consider going out there with him?
No, not yet. Not yet. I've never been in a horse, that's why no way.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The company says tough economic times means it cannot maintain its workforce. 31 positions are to go from the Sprinter car project, a deal for the Victorian Railways. In May, 70 workers were asked to go following a slowdown in the Tangara train contract. In other industrial news, the BHP blast furnace and rail traffic workers met with union officials today after going on strike at midnight over a safety dispute.
The company supervision had dragged an oxy line across the furnace, potentially was explosive. Our members took action against the supervisor and withdrew their labour.
About 80 men went out, but this afternoon they voted to return to work immediately. Workers now expect to meet with management for further discussions on the issue. The union says the 16-hour strike has cost the BHP hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost production. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The Tari bypass is due to be completed in 1998, but the member for Mile Lake says it may be sooner with the awarding of the Stage 2 contract.
This one's a significant tender, it's $11.4 million. involves 3 bridges and a flyover down near Purfleet, so it's a big part of the project.
Work began on bridge escarpments and approaches last year. When completed, the bypass will complement highway upgrading south of Taree. John Turner says it will result in a reduction of heavy vehicles travelling through the CBD. He's confident Taree, like Goulburn and Yass, will prosper from the road changes.
We'll make it a very, very nice area to shop for the retail concept of Taree, and it will attract people as well. People will come off the highway because we're going to put a gateway concept in off the expressway so that people will feel invited to come into Taree and relax, stay, purchase things.
Looks like a fade.
The young Wamberal surfer is a marketer's dream. The blonde hair, the looks and the right attitude to make it to the top. At only 17, he already has his own signature series of bodyboards. He left school last year after winning the Australian title. He's since taken out numerous international events, his latest 2 pro tournaments in Japan. Next week he sets off for Tasmania as a prelude to the Australian titles in 5 weeks. He hopes to be one of the first bodyboarders on the proposed international circuit as the sport continues to grow in popularity.
It's just going from, it's just a weekend at the beach, fun day, with a bodyboard to a huge multi-million-dollar sport. So it's changed a lot in the last 2 years.
And there's no chance this bodyboarder will switch to the more entrenched Australian surf sport.
I appreciate what the surfers do, but the bodyboarding, you've got to look at it in a different way, in a way of, it's acrobatics and surfing at the same time. There's a lot more manoeuvres coming into bodyboarding now than what you can do on a surfboard.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
The breakdown in negotiations between the federal government and general practitioners over pay and conditions indicates that the kindly country doctor many like to imagine is fighting for survival.
The majority of country GPs, as well as doing all the things that urban GPs do, also often provide hospital services. And that means that they require skills over and above what urban GPs do.
According to a gathering of Hunter rural GPs at Maitland, workloads and community expectations are increasing, while few new medicos are prepared to replace older doctors retiring or quitting the country. Some specialist areas, such as obstetrics, aren't available outside the cities.
And in Cessnock, we've only got 1 GP per 2,000 of population. In Newcastle, there's 1 GP per 1,000, and in Sydney, there's 1 GP per 800.
Doctors are exploring education, income and assistance programs with the government as country practices become increasingly political. The last federal budget offered little cash incentive to GPs.
The North Nelson Bay Marlins in the blue were aiming for 6 straight wins and scored the first points courtesy of an Andrew Ripley penalty goal. But South hit the front minutes later when fullback Jamie Hadfield filled the Marlins' defence to cross for the first try. Gary Bray converted from the sideline to give the locals a 6-2 lead. The pressure started to show on the Marlins, fullback Garth Brennan making an uncharacteristic mistake. South took advantage of possession with a cutout pass finding Mick Reed for try number 2. Bray hooked the goal, leaving South with an 8-point buffer. South continued to raid the Marlin line, a Garth Brennan tackle saving a certain try. But just one play later, South had another 4-pointer. The kick made it 16-2 and the Marlins looked out of it. But the visitors weren't ready to end their season, with a late charge in the first half getting them within 4 points. But it was a short-lived recovery by the Marlins, with South kicking away in the second half to win by 30 points to 6. In lower grade, Cessnock beat Lakes, and Curry is still alive in third grade. Richard O'Leary, NBN News. On August 9, 1934, a group of theatre-goers boarded the ferry Bluebell. They had just seen A Night to Remember, a film about the sinking of the Titanic. They were to become the victims of a cruel irony. Minutes after leaving the foreshore, the ferry collided with a freighter, splitting the passenger craft in 2. 3 people were trapped in the Bluebell and drowned. Today, the grandchildren of 2 of the families met to commemorate the tragedy. Cousins Irene Strom and Thelma Bloy paid tribute to their grandmother Annie Kerr, and Vaughan Staples to remember her grandmother Isabel Frew.
I always think about them. You know, we often come in to the wharf and I always remember.
I was only at school when it happened, and my father came and got me, and we had to come across on the ferry the next day, and what I saw I will always remember.
The 3 boarded the Stockton ferry at Queen's Wharf, only a few hundred metres from where their grandmothers last touched land. The trip was even more traumatic for Irene Strom, who has feared water travel since the sinking of the Bluebell. A few flowers and some private words mark 60 years of grief, as the families finally said goodbye.
Well, I feel much happier now that it's over. It was very emotional, and we did it for our grandparents and also for our own parents. I think they would have liked that.
Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Commissioned by the Australian Coal Association, Granny's Secret Fossil has already been seen by about 7,000 children. It was billed by Premier Fay as a play every child in New South Wales should see. It began a season in the Hunter and Central Coast today, which will involve 3,500 children from 26 schools. Using slapstick comedy, dance and melodrama, Granny's Secret Fossil is nonetheless a science lesson. The audience learns how coal becomes energy and how that in turn powers appliances like lights and fans. The Coal Association wanted the play to stress the importance of energy conservation. Set in the future when fossil fuels are all but exhausted, the play also looks at the potential of alternative sources like solar and wind-generated power. It's a coup for Lismore writer Paul Johnson and the North Coast-based Brainstorm Productions. As well as Hunter and Illawarra region schools, the show has been performed at Parliament House and for the Australian Science Conference in Canberra.
It's planned to have the extra teachers in classrooms for the beginning of first term next year, with the government claiming it will give New South Wales one of the lowest class sizes in the country. A breakdown of the allocation for the Hunter region sees 69 new primary school teachers targeting literacy and numeracy standards in kinder and years 1 and 2. 27 extra secondary teachers, allowing average class sizes to drop by 1 to 17, 19 new counsellors, giving a ratio of 1:1,000 or so, and 10 special education positions to provide greater opportunity for students with disabilities.
We really welcome the announcement of the increased numbers of teachers, because for the first time since 1988 the Minister has recognised that classes are too large and has taken positive steps to try and alleviate the problem.
The Teachers Federation welcomes the extra commitment to early childhood education, but says it would like to see class sizes reduced even further.
Well, we certainly want more, and we believe it's a good start, and it's certainly a recognition that lower classes lead to better learning conditions.
The Education Department says the new teaching positions, when converted to full and part-time hours, will provide jobs for 260 people in the Hunter region.
The Tomago workers had already negotiated a 5% pay rise, but after a company report showed productivity from individual workers was up 46%, the workers want more. In total, they're seeking a 10% increase, and from Friday they'll strike for 6 days.
At this stage, the resolve of the blokes is very strong, and it will going to be survival of the fittest.
Management is hopeful talks in the Industrial Relations Commission can stop the strike. The union says the feeling between employer and employee is the worst it's been in at least 5 years. And the picket at Rundle's clothing factory at Katara is continuing.
The company stinks, and so does the situation.
23 people were sacked over a redundancy pay dispute. 300 workers are on strike in sympathy. Managing Director Peter Rundle says he has made an offer of an above-award payment. He's angry that union officials from Sydney are controlling a dispute in Newcastle which could affect his company's viability.
Well, I'm saying if the union holds it out for long enough, I guess we'll have to shut the doors. The people that want to come to work are welcome to come to work. There's nobody being suggested they can't come to work.
The strikers will meet tomorrow morning. Peter Ryan, NBN News.